Well, welcome to the Aging Boomers. I'm your host, Frank Sampson, and of course on our show, many of you know, we discuss so many of the issues facing boomers, their parents, and what we know, of course, is an aging population. Want to, first of all, just thank everybody for just all their support. We're getting so many more listeners. Many of you have gone on to iTunes, some on iHeartRadio, and I would say our biggest growth is just on our free app. You just have to go onto your iPhone, Android phone, iPad, whatever, and just download our free app. Just type in the Aging Boomers, and you could get updated on each and every show. And so I want to thank you all for all your support. Tell your friends, family, a lot of great information. I want to remind everybody that today's show is sponsored by Senior Care Authority, a professional senior placement and elder care management organization that has a national network of advisors to help in determining the right path for senior living and receiving proper care. So whether it's in-home care, assisted living, residential, or memory care, get the necessary advice from a senior care advisor in your area by calling Senior Care Authority at 888-809-1231, or you could go directly to their website at seniorcareauthority.com. Also, I want to let everybody know, under the same name, The Aging Boomers, I check out my new book that came out, and actually it's called The Aging Boomers. You could just go to Amazon. I was honored to know it came out pretty quick as a #1 bestseller in various categories. It's going to be coming out in a print version very soon, but you could get it on Amazon on the Kindle version, on the ebook version. So check it out. I took a lot of the many of the interviews that I did with people and kind of put it together, and we've gotten a lot of great comments on it. So I hope you take the time to read it. I'm excited about today's guest, a subject matter that's not talked about enough. We have with us Ronnie Genser. Ronnie is prior to founding her company, Bereavement Navigators, in 2012. Ronnie, her background included over 25 years in international and domestic sales, marketing, training, and consulting. Ronnie also served on the board of directors of the Lewy Body Dementia Association, creating a support group network, continuing to provide families and caregivers the resources to cope with the life changes wrought by Lewy body dementia. Ronnie's successful career path took an unexpected turn after the sudden death of her husband, Dr. Sandy Weinberg, an associate professor at healthcare management at Clayton State University. The things Ronnie learned about what she needed to do after Sandy's death, including how to organize the numerous and unexpected tasks, the resources she found, and the tips she learned, she now shares in her work as a bereavement navigator with other widows, widowers, adult children, and other relatives who have lost a loved one, in hopes that her knowledge will make this process and the journey ahead easier for them. So, Ronnie, first of all, thank you for all you do, and thank you for joining us on the Aging Boomers.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So, when you became a widow, a lot of the tasks you had to deal with relating to your husband, I'm sure there were some difficult ones, but what were those that most difficult that come to your mind?
I think it's not only most difficult, but things that surprised me, things that I wasn't expecting, or as I like to say, nobody taught us in high school. I call it all the personal and practical tasks, sort of personal and practical in quotes, that I needed to do and how long they take. I really, was under this illusion that if I just went to the probate attorney, to settle the will, and I went to our financial advisor, our accountant, and insurance people, that I was sort of done, and maybe a few bank accounts here or there. And what I realized was there were bunches and bunches, hundreds it seems like, personal and practical tasks that I needed to do, and I had no idea how long they would take. And as I said, they never taught us this stuff in high school. And I also realized that there's a tremendous amount of detail that I really needed. That really surprised me. I had what I call asset sheets that said, what did we own, bank accounts, investments, all kinds of things like that, plus a little bit more detail. And I thought, that was all the detail I needed. And I realized there's just really much, much more detail. I really needed to have made things easier. So it was a pretty stressful and frustrating time. And today I really like to emphasize that there's no such thing as too much detail. I can't stress that enough. So those were the things that really surprised me. The results of that overwhelmed me. And I really think that the baby boomers don't realize what they'll be facing, as evidenced by close friends, my financial advisor. People said that to me, say, "Oh my God, I never realized there was all this stuff to do or to consider or take care of."
So how did you start just in taking your experience and saying, "Hey, I'm gonna do this as a business to help others"? What kind of was the driving force to do that?
It wasn't me. It was actually my financial. I never even thought about this. I was so involved with all the personal and practical tasks on a daily basis that I never even thought about this. It was just how can I get through all this? And, at that time I still had a international sales and marketing business, and, I was trying to keep that piece going, and, it just felt like I had a zillion balls in the air. So it was really, my husband died in early October 2011, in fact, on a very important day. And I'm Jewish, and the Jewish calendar called Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. It's
right.
Probably, in terms of importance, it would be like someone in the Christian faith dying on Christmas or Easter, where everybody will remember this forever.
Of course.
But anyway, so about 2.5 months later, at my end-of-year review with my financial advisor of probably now 25 years, and when we're having our meeting, she says to me, "I don't want to talk about finances. I want to talk about something else." I thought, okay, this is strange, but fine. And she says to me, "I never realized how much stuff," sort of in quotes, "there is to do." I affectionately now call that personal and practical tasks after the death of a loved one. And she has a small practice, maybe 6 people, and she said, "I couldn't just stop my business and do this. You ought to make this part of your international and domestic sales and marketing consulting practice." And I say to her, "Well, I don't think the two go together. It has to be a separate business, and I don't have any bandwidth right now in terms of time or energy to do this. Let's talk about it in the spring." So when the spring comes, and I'm still doing, and for it seems like years, still do the personal and practical stuff, I have dinner with another friend of mine of about 25 years, who had become a planner about 8 years ago, and I had written a marketing plan, at least a 2-page overview, and I kind of threw it at her over dessert and said, "Do you think this would make a business?" And instead of saying yes or no, she says to me, "You need to speak to the Financial Planning Association of Georgia. I'll get you a speaking engagement." And I'm thinking, they're probably booked 6 or 9 months. I can go on with the personal and practical stuff. I don't have to worry about this. Very sweet of her to think of me. 10 days later, she calls me and she says, "You're on their calendar for 2 months from now." And I think, oh my gosh, I don't have a business name. I don't have a business license, both things of which I want to have in order to speak to such a prestigious group. And have, even if I haven't any clients, I at least want to be real. And I have no idea what she wants me to talk about. And she says to me, "You need to speak to them about the cost of not understanding grief. It's a real problem in the industry, and it's been that way for 5 to 10 years. They've built books of business of baby boomers. They have a couple, a widow who comes in the relationship has been stronger with the husband, especially if he had a business. She comes in crying. They want to move in, they want her to buy annuities, move things around. She can't even see straight because it's probably within the first couple of weeks after his death. And you have to tell them that they have time, And I said, sure, I can do this. We can talk about some other issues related to all of this. And so I worked the next 2 months, and I got a business license, got a name for the business. We decided on a name for the business and put together a speech. And when I gave the speech, at the end of the speech, during questions and answers, a woman raised her hand. She said she was an estate attorney, that she was a member of this organization. She told me that they rarely had content from their speakers, that I had given them content. She paused, silent for a couple of minutes, and then she says, "You nailed it." And I thought to myself, maybe I do have a business here.
That's
Long
great.
story, but that's how it came about. It wasn't that I drove it. It was because basically the financial planning community drove it. Yeah.
I went to your website, which is bereavementnavigators.com. You have a lot of information on there, great information. But if you could kind of help our listeners kind of give them an overview, give us an overview on kind of the main services that you offer to
Sure.
families. Yeah.
The business now has, I'm a marketeer, so I call it service offerings, 2 prongs to the business. One, the original service offering is called After Death, and you can see that when you go to the website and say, why engage us? There's a drop-down menu. It says After Death and Before Death. And under what the business started off doing was working with widows, widowers, adult children, and all the things outside their professional service advisors, meaning I don't do anything related to legal issues. I will refer people to estate or probate attorneys if they need them. I don't do anything related to financial advisory. Again, I refer people out to those. The accountant, anything to do with taxes, they should be using their accountant. And obviously, if they have some life insurance or things like that, they should be talking to their life insurance agent. But all the other stuff, the website says tasks. I also say personal and practical things. That's what we work on. Anything from, for example, helping people sort through if there's medical bills. For example, my husband was 2 days at one hospital here in Atlanta called Northside, where they did an operation. He was in ICU. They asked me if we could transfer him to a hospital across the street and see the head cardiologist there. He had another operation there. At the end of that, a week later, they told me there was nothing more they could do. I had to make the ultimate decision to take him off the machine, and afterwards was presented with $400,000 worth of medical bills from 14 medical groups and 12 individual doctors, and had to figure out what was paid for and by our insurance, which was Good Blue Cross Blue Shield, and what wasn't paid for, and found out after I built out the spreadsheet that there was still $4,000 worth of bills that I owed, because who reads the fine print and sees what isn't covered? You just assume it's pretty much all covered after the deductible.
Right.
And so there are big things like that. There are big things like I've had clients who have maybe an art collection and want to either donate it or sell it, so work with them. And then there are small things where people just want to call up and ask questions and have a resource, and they want to say things like, so I've got this bag of drugs from my mother, ethical drugs. I don't want to flush them down the toilet. I want to do the right thing. Where do you get rid of them? And so I'll let them know where to get rid of them. In my city, I obviously know where that is. If somebody's calling from out of state, I'll do we'll do a little research to find out where they are. But I'll answer them so that it can just be an ongoing resource. So sometimes I do here in Greater Atlanta, I do face-to-face meetings and or ad hoc phone calls when people want that type of service. Out of state, it's pretty much all on the phone. So that's the first service offering, is after a death. It's really to, as you say, guide widows or widowers or adult children through all the personal and practical issues, and be a resource for them.
Yeah.
Then people came to me as I started doing speaking engagements, specifically to what I call end user groups, meaning people who may or may not be close to death. In fact, I really don't want to work with anybody if it's only a couple of months away, because they really should be with their loved ones, and it's really too late. But if they're, people like myself, or it sounds like you, healthy, and we want to see if our planning and our preparation has been enough, or if it's, things won't be so stressful like it was for me, should a loved one die. Then what I do under before death consulting is I work with people to say, let's talk about what you've done so far. Let's talk about the top 3 things that are stressing you about your preparation. We'll work on those first. And then after that, I work with them over a series of meetings and figure out what I think the most important holes are that they really need to fill in, so that, as I say, the greatest gift they can give their loved ones is this gift of preparation, understanding, of course, that there's no perfect preparation. Right. There will always be some things that probably you have to do or didn't know about or whatever. Certainly they can call me, after death too, and we can work together again, but at least they are in much better shape than many people are when they're faced with having to handle, I don't know the right word to use. Estate sounds like you have to have a lot of stuff, have to have a lot of money, but just all the things that person owned, And if I say affairs, everybody thinks, something social, and I'm talking about, again, the things that people owned. So
yeah. So I want to talk about preparation. I know in my industry, and I'm in the long-term care industry, there's, somebody gets to a certain age, they get to 70, and there's probably a pretty good chance that they're going to need some sort of long-term care in the future. But it's still, we work hard in our business and our industry to get people to prepare, all right? And what you're doing, there's a 100% chance that it's going to happen, okay?
Yes.
I mean, at least last time I checked. So how do you get people to really prepare for this? A lot of people just don't want to talk about it.
Exactly. It's very tough. I want to say it's very tough. I will tell you this, that 2 things come to mind quickly. One is my husband and I had several couples who were very close friends. We had a lot of friends, but specifically several couples who were very, very close friends. I saw, after his death and them sort of hearing, what I'm doing, in fact, it was probably the couple that I thought was most prepared, because of some situations they'd had before, sort of say, oh my God, I never realized there was all this stuff to do. And I got the feeling they were scurrying around, filling in what they thought were gaps. They never asked for services, but I felt like they really sat down and took another look at what they had done and what they had come to realize they might be faced with. And so that was kind of like one situation. Other type of situation is where someone comes to me. I actually can think of a third too. Someone comes to me and they've just been given a diagnosis for an illness or a situation that may not be terminal this second, but within a period of time, there may or may not be medical care that will reverse that condition, or it may be a chronic condition that's going to go on for a long time. Those are kind of wake-up calls. A third case that just comes to mind is the fact that I can't say anybody, but many people have been widows or widows themselves and have gone through this experience of having to deal with someone's estate affairs, realizes what's involved. So they are probably at the top of the list who really, as we would say, get it in terms of why one should be prepared. So those are the top 3 things I think that come to mind as to people who are sort of on the leading edge. And I think as baby boomers age and they experience friends, relatives, in either a health situation or actually having died, it's really becomes a wake. I think that's what becomes a wake up call. And as you know, the baby boomer population is growing, and number of people, 10,000 people a day over 65. I think right now we're sort of on the leading edge of people sort of waking up, and obviously it takes a while for people to move from other people to move from leading or bleeding edge to mass market.
Right. So staying on preparation, which is so important, what have you seen? I mean, you must have seen people who you feel maybe made some mistakes or poor judgments or whatever in the preparation process. What do you think some of those are?
Well, one, not doing enough preparation and finding that they don't have enough information or data to make life a little bit easier. I mean, things like I use this in one of my presentations because it's always kind of a wake-up call. And I say to the audience, okay, how many of you have IDs and passwords for all of your loved ones' accounts, whatever those are? It could be banking accounts, could be asset accounts, it could be just all kinds of websites that you need to go to, et cetera. And so, maybe, a bunch of people raise their hands. And then I say to them, how many of you have the ID and or password, whatever you need, to get on every physical piece of computer-related equipment that your loved one owns? And hardly any hands go up. Right. And the reason I ask that question is because that was one of my first awakenings to preparation, in that I had this list of all our assets. I thought I had some IDs and passwords of the ones that he had established accounts at, online accounts at, and then all of a sudden I go to his computer because I need to get something like his... he was also a professor, so I wanted to get what's called a CV. It's basically his resume, so I could write a obituary. And I realized I don't have the password to get on his, just to even get on his computer. And time is ticking because this has to go to the funeral director and then hence to the press. Right. And had it not been for one of his good friends who just happened to call me about the time that I'm experiencing all this, and said, and who worked with him, one of his good friends and colleagues, said, "Do you have a CV? Do you have a CV?" And I said, "No, I'm just going to have to give up the idea of writing a really good obituary," because he was a pretty accomplished man. And he said, "No problem. I've got it on my computer. Give me 5 minutes and you'll have it." And he did, and so I could put together the obituary I wanted for him. So it's sort of things like that sort of just you don't think about. It's little holes here, and for some people it's big holes, but for some things it's what you think little holes. One piece of information.
There's so much,
and it doesn't have to be IDs and passwords. It can be anything. Another example is when I was applying for the lump sum death benefit with Social Security. One of the questions they asked me, I thought I had all the details in front of me when I was on the phone, and they said to me, "What was your husband's mother's maiden name?" And I thought, "Oh my God, I'm not sure I know." I married. I was a first time, as I call myself, affectionately baby boomer. Menopause. First time menopausal bride. I got married for the first time at age 53. My husband was divorced, and I don't think that that's the kind of question that during our courtship of many years and our early marriage, you kind of say, "So by the way, what's your mother's maiden name?" And I was so grieving that I didn't realize that if I just thought about his cousins, some of his first cousins, they have his, the same name as his mother's. They were the son of her brother, so they have the maiden, their name. I was just so distraught I didn't even think about it. But I'm sitting on the phone and I go, oh, and then I remembered what it was. And so there's all this kind of stuff that arises, and I could go on forever, but perhaps you want to ask another question.
Well, it's all great information. So, we unfortunately only have just a couple minutes left, but, maybe I could just give you just an open-ended one, and that is, just if you were to provide any words of wisdom or advice for people, maybe an important thing you feel everybody should do while they're healthy, whatever you would like. Why don't you just share that with our listeners? Yeah,
I think the most important thing, the number one thing that I hope everybody would do, regardless if they do, detailed, make lists of detailed things, is I would like them to have what now is being called the conversation. And if you haven't heard that term before, Ellen Goodman, who was a syndicated columnist for the Washington Post, has a website called The Conversation Project, and it's all about having a conversation about our end-of-life wishes with our loved ones, so that they can speak for us, know what we want, are not racked by indecision, stress, not knowing, guilt, all kinds of things if we can't speak for ourselves. I think in addition to having conversations about our end-of-life care, what we want and what we don't want, the part two, or the corollary to that, is continuing that conversation. Doesn't have to be the same day, and conversations continue over time. We can change our minds, or say we forgot something. Is to have a conversation about what matters to us most at end of life. And in my mind, in my experience, especially with my husband, that was really what I was asked when things were not looking good. That they really asked me questions, not so much what was in my advance directive for health care, what boxes he had checked or things like that. I had that obviously with me and things like that, and I think they kind of knew. But they said to me questions like, what would he want if he couldn't return to good health? What would be most important for him to do? That he would want to live for. What would he want for me? If things weren't, if things weren't good, if he had to live in a nursing home would he want to live in a nursing home for the rest of his life? Being kept alive on a machine or things like that. So it's really probably the most important thing that I talk with anybody about is how important it is to have that conversation with your loved ones. I mean, whether you're single and it's with other family members or a friend who's going to speak for you, or family and, in my case, I think I've done this with family now and friends, so that everybody knows, because we just never know what will happen in our lives. I mean, obviously, I certainly didn't expect my husband to have a heart attack at age 61 and have 2 operations and be gone 9 days later. So that's my wish for everybody. If you do nothing else, go to Ellen Goodman's website, learn about the conversation, fill out the form so you can talk about what you want, and in terms of end-of-life care and what truly matters to you at end of life. They really need to know that. And for that, I am eternally grateful, because even though Ellen had started this nonprofit about 3-4 years ago, I think because we were older, we had these kinds of conversations, perhaps not with the structure or the formality, but I knew in my heart what he wanted, and that's truly the greatest gift he gave me. There is nothing else that matters as much to me as that, because I could truly grieve and go forward, never looking back with guilt, questioning, second thoughts. So I thank you for asking me this question.
All right. Ronnie, why don't you let people know that website you're referring to, what's the website they would go to, and also your website, how would people learn more?
Okay. It's called, Ellen Goodman's website is called theconversationproject.org, 3 words altogether, theconversationproject.org. It has tons and tons of information. My website is Bereavement Navigators, all one word, .com.
Great. Ronnie Genser, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. And great information. And so thanks for joining us on the Aging Boomers. And I want to let everybody know to just, again, be safe out there. And we'll talk to you all soon.